It's this bizarre mix of edgelord, I'm such a badass chest thumping and like milady fedora tipping. I read 14 dark and paranormal romance books in 14 days, and today I want to talk to you about Haunting Adeline by H.D. Carlton. This is a stalker romance with plenty of content warning, so if any of the stuff that is on the screen now is going to bother you in a book, make sure that you skip this review. I also want to take a brief moment to mention that this review is being made for other readers and fans of dark romance to decide if this is the right book for them. In the vein of full disclosure, I did not particularly like this book, but if you do, that's okay. If you love Haunting Adeline, that's fantastic. This review isn't for you. It's also not for the author. I'm not out here trying to upset anybody or hurt anybody's feelings. Now that that's out of the way, hit the subscribe button and ring the bell while I tell you a little bit about the plot. This will be a spoiler-free review. I'm going to do a full plot deep dive on this series in another video, so make sure that you keep your eye out for that in the next coming weeks. Alright, so Haunting Adeline follows a 26-year-old author named, you guessed it, Adeline. Adeline considers herself a master manipulator, though we never really get to see any of that manipulation. She loves black, she loves Halloween and all things dark and spooky, she loves to be afraid, and she has recently inherited a gothic manor painted in black and red from her deceased grandmother. Adeline's chapters are interspersed with perspective chapters from the main male love interest, Zade Meadows, who is the leader of a vigilante hacking syndicate that is intent on taking down crime rings that focus on trafficking in women and children. Zade Meadows, in addition to being the best hacker in the world, of course, is also a flawless social engineer, able to talk himself into and out of a series of totally believable, very realistic scenarios. He is also a mixed martial artist with a banging hot body and perfect combat skills, and also Adeline's stalker. Adeline is kind of one of those heroines that emphatically exclaims within her internal monologue that she's terrified for her life and is afraid of all the danger and, oh, woe is me, what am I going to do? While also making the very stupid decision to run directly towards said danger. Think of like Monster, where the heroine is sort of like running through the woods and trips on some sort of invisible root and then falls face first into the dirt with her butt up in the air and her skirt very conveniently flipped up, and it's like, oh no, Mr. Monster Man, don't hurt me, tee-hee. All the while she's like backing up into him and like rubbing herself on him. It's very reminiscent of that sort of situation. For his part, Zade's chapters read like a weird mix of like incel blog and Meninist stream of consciousness. It's this bizarre mix of edgelord, I'm such a badass chest thumping and like milady fedora tipping. I didn't really know what to make of it. The only thing that slightly redeems Zade maybe is that his external dialogue, the things he says out loud, are not quite as annoying or ridiculous as his internal monologue, and believe me, that's not saying much. So the main plot starts out with Zade discovering Adeline at a book signing because apparently he's really into socially awkward freckled girls with husky voices, and rather than walk up and introduce himself like a normal human being or ask her out on a date, he decides that the right move to make her fall in love with him is to stalk her. Because I guess if he asks her out on a real date, that she won't get to see the real him, which is super dark and really edgy. So instead of behaving like a normal human being, Zade starts stalking Adeline. He leaves flowers inside her house after breaking in. He starts leaving her weird messages and sending her weird texts. He starts protecting her from men she voluntarily brings home and participates in consensual sexual interactions with by cutting off their hands for daring to touch her. You know, the huge. Side by side with the main stalker romance part of the plot, each of these characters has a subplot. So Zade is trying to infiltrate this child trafficking ring that is participating in these sort of matey-uppy satanic rituals where they're sacrificing kids. And Adeline is trying to track down the person who killed her grandmother after discovering that her grandmother also had a stalker that she just conveniently fell in love with. Zade's subplot exists exclusively to help the reader differentiate between the real danger posed by the criminals that Zade is dealing with in his work life and the "it's totally okay because I love you" danger that Zade's stalking represents. Addie's subplot was added in to help the reader justify to themselves why it's okay for Addie to fall in love with Zade. Because I guess as long as your grandma did it, it's fine that you fall in love with a man who breaks into your house and sexually assaults you with a firearm. Now, I will say, I am not one of those people who's going to sit and rail on dark romances or pick them apart because of all the problematic things in them. That's why they exist. Dark romance books are problematic by design. They exist specifically to allow readers to experience danger and thrill and risk through the safe filter of a story by living vicariously through the characters' experiences. That is all 100% okay, and I am not going to knock the value or enjoyment of those experiences. So the fact that things like her being SA'd with a gun are not the reason I didn't like this book. When you're reading and things like that are being set up, because they have to be set up, that's part of writing a book, you should not see the author's hand moving the pieces on the board. There is a subtlety to it. There is subtext that needs to be interlaced. You should allow the reader to figure things out on their own and derive their own understanding and enjoyment from things, rather than constantly telling them how they're supposed to feel. This book does not understand the concept of subtext. When you sit down to read, although you are aware that you are sitting there reading a book, you shouldn't be constantly reminded while you're reading, oh hey, you're reading a book. A lot of the decisions that Adeline makes, where she's brave to the point of stupidity, are so very clearly the author making her do dumb things just to set up the next kink scenario in a way that you can't even buy into it or get invested in it because the author's hand is so incredibly visible. It's so heavy-handed and so contrived and so obvious that the author is setting the audience up for kink exploration that it loses any narrative investment or enjoyment. And it's so over-explainy and so overt and direct in the way that these characters' minds work and what they're thinking and what they're feeling. You know what they're feeling all the time because they just flat tell you, I am sad. Not quite, but near enough. It certainly reads that way. And that's one of the reasons that this book felt so off to me. It's the complete lack of realistic decisions or realistic mentalities exhibited by the characters. And bear in mind, we're talking about like fantasy and wish fulfillment here. I understand all of that. But there does need to be some sort of baseline believability in order to get me invested. And this book just didn't have it. At any time, Adeline could have made any number of different decisions to not wind up in some of the scenarios she very clearly put herself into, and she just keeps making the same choices over and over and over again because the author is trying to get the kinks on the page rather than actually write characters that are believable or relatable, and that's really a shame. At any point, she could have checked into a hotel. She could have hired security. She has plenty of money. Her friend works for a security company. She could have chosen not to go to the dinner at the house of a guy who Zade tells her is dangerous. And when a guy who's super dangerous is telling you like, oh, hey, that guy's really dangerous, maybe you should listen. And all of this because she got invested in a murder that's generations old, to get information out of him that he may or may not have. She's putting herself in mortal danger for this. Like, come on, who does that? she's worried about being kidnapped and assaulted, and she goes to a carnival and wanders off into a secluded space on her own where nobody's going to be able to hear her if she screams for help. You know, somebody's breaking into her house and assaulting her, and it never occurs to her to purchase a weapon. There's no logic here to any of it. Addie just keeps going back and keeps doing the same thing over and over and over to set the pins up so the author can knock them down in the next scene. And it is so overt and so clear that that is what is happening that you can't even enjoy the ride. And Zade's chapters are just as bad, aside from the incel edgelord monologue that is a constant running thing through his chapters. He has dedicated his life to saving women and children, and then somehow is able to do the mental gymnastics to justify his own behavior with Addie to himself because she's mine. The good, and the thing is, right, the book is unironically trying to convince us that the good he's trying to do over here by rescuing these women and children somehow is made to make him forgivable for the things he's doing to Addie. And it just doesn't work that way. Emotionally, morally, it doesn't work that way. The good stuff you do over here does not negate the bad stuff you're doing over here, especially when they are in, two sides of the exact same coin. He fights daily against people who terrorize women and then spends his nights terrorizing a woman. The thing is, he knows it. He talks about it constantly in his internal monologue and then justifies it as, oh, he's not that bad. She'll want him eventually. And makes it make sense to himself because he loves her or something, because he wants to marry her and impregnate her, which is a huge running theme in the book, is Zade wants to get Addie with his babies. And why that is, I don't understand. And we're just meant to go along with it because, she's the main female character and he's the main male character. And that, I guess, is what makes it okay. And I guess he loves her or something. He doesn't know her. I don't know how he could love her. And, oh, by the way, love doesn't justify abuse. It never has, and it never will. And Addie has at no time consented or invited him or indicated to him in any way that she is into what's going on, that she wants it, that she wants him. At no time does she, until she is already so enlaced in his life that she cannot escape him. And it's Stockholm Syndrome. And not, I don't even want to say not in a sexy way because Stockholm Syndrome is obviously not sexy, but there's a way to do it in these books and it's just so gosh darn bad. The worst part about this book, in fact, is the characters. Aside from Zade's incel monologue that he constantly has going on repeat, I might add. I keep repeating this because it is repetitive in the book. He's also supposed to be portrayed as this beautiful creature and flawless and perfect and makes all these excellent choices and is a combat tactician and the man is supposed to be set up to have no flaws, and yet every part of him is completely insufferable. Addie is just as bad. She's an idiot who is constantly running into danger and then crying about all the danger she's in. She makes stupid choices for stupid reasons, and we're somehow supposed to relate to her, and y'all, I just can't. Never mind her tacky, trashy best friend who works for a security company and somehow it never occurs to them to secure any meaningful security for Adeline or her home or, just stop staying there, get a hotel, stay with Daya for a while. And not that she's safe there because I guess Zade knows all her friends and where they live. It makes sense that he would given the situation, but he knows everything instantly all the time. There is no delay between the seeking and acquisition of information, even for somebody like Daya, who arguably would have the skill set to keep herself a little more hidden. It just doesn't make any sense. It is not just the characters that make this book fall down. It's also the way that things are written. So aside from the personalities that they're given, the dialogue is bad. The writing is just bad. Let me give you a few examples. Sometimes I have very dark thoughts about my mother. Thoughts no sane daughter should ever have. Sometimes I'm not always sane. Addie, you're being ridiculous, Mom says through the speaker of my phone. I glare at it in response, refusing to argue with her. When I have nothing to say, she sighs loudly. I wrinkle my nose. It blows my mind that this woman always called Nana dramatic, and yet can't see her own flair for the dramatics. That is the first few lines in the book. That's how the book opens. Just so that you know that I'm not just making this up, this is at the end of chapter 1 when Addie and the trashy best friend Daya go out for a drink. Addie, you need to get laid. In response, I wrap my lips around my straw and slurp my blueberry martini as deeply as my mouth will allow. Daya, my best friend, eyes me, entirely unimpressed and impatient based on the quirk of her brow. I think I need a bigger mouth. More alcohol would fit in it. Just swallow, maybe? That's a thought. I don't say this out loud because I can bet my left ass cheek that her follow-up response would be to use it for a bigger dick instead. Classy. When I continue sucking on the straw, she reaches over and rips the plastic from my lips. I've reached the bottom of the glass a solid 15 seconds ago and have just been sucking air through the straw. It's the most action my mouth's gotten in a year now. It carries on that way for several more pages, and it just never gets any better. The entire book is written that way, and it's all just sort of low rent. And I know that makes me sound like a snob. I know that it does. But if I'm going to sit here and read a book that is more than 500 pages long, I would like for it to read with slightly more sophistication than an after-school special written by a horny teenager. There were certainly concepts in this book that I could have really gotten into if it weren't for the terrible characters and bad writing. The infamous gun scene, for example, right up my alley. Stalker boyfriend who cuts the hands off of somebody who's a danger to the girl? Absolutely, sign me up. I love those types of aspects, that like really edgy stuff in dark romance, but the characters got in the way and the writing got in the way, and I just can't, y'all. I just cannot with this book. So that's all I've got for this one. I'm gonna go wash my eyeballs now. Keep an eye out for the full plot breakdown if you really want to torture yourself and me. Patreon members get access to my TBR or direct influence over my TBR. So if you really want to make me suffer, you can do that there. Also, add me on Twitch. I don't know, if you hang out on Twitch, add me over there. In March, I'm going to start doing live read-alongs for books that people vote on in Discord. You can add me in Discord down below, and all the links are down there. And I've totally done this a million times. I just have forgotten to do an outro. So thanks for hanging out. Have an excellent day. I'll see you in the next one.